At my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law demanded I hand over the keys to my farm right in front of 200 guests. When I refused, he struck me so forcefully that I stumbled and fell. I left the scene and placed a crucial phone call. He became frantic when he realized who I had contacted. I'm pleased you're listening. Stay with my tale to the conclusion and share the city you're tuning in from so I can gauge how widely my story has spread. I never envisioned my daughter's wedding day concluding with me injured on the elegant ballroom floor of the venue. But that's precisely what occurred when Michael revealed his genuine nature before 200 attendees. The day commenced as any father's ideal vision. Emily appeared luminous in her grandmother's antique silk gown, the very one my late wife Elizabeth donned 30 years earlier. I escorted her down the aisle of the historic chapel, holding back emotions as she gripped my arm and murmured that she longed for her mother to witness this moment. For an instant, all seemed flawless. For an instant, I set aside the mounting discomfort I'd harbored about Michael for several months. The vows exchanged were exquisite. Emily radiated joy, and I compelled myself to grin each time Michael's gaze met mine. He possessed that rehearsed allure, the type that deceived most except those who observed intently. I'd grown to scrutinize closely during the previous 18 months, since he began posing targeted inquiries about the farm estate, my estate plans, and the fate of the property after my passing. Yet weddings tend to expose individuals' authentic selves, and Michael's facade started crumbling amid the reception mingle. I stood by the refreshment area, sipping a scotch, observing Emily chuckle with her university companions when Michael materialized next to me. His necktie was slackened, his cheeks reddened from wine, and a sterner glint appeared in his eyes. "John," he uttered, placing his palm on my shoulder with undue pressure. "We must discuss something." I pivoted to confront him, observing how nearby guests had hushed their chats. "What regarding son?" The term son appeared to annoy him. His jaw tightened briefly before he compelled another grin. "Regarding the farm, regarding Emily's prospects, our prospects. This isn't the appropriate moment or setting." "Michael," I maintained a subdued tone, aiming to ease the tension brewing. "It's your marriage celebration. Savor it." But Michael had alternative intentions. He edged nearer, his tone sinking to a murmur that somehow seemed more menacing than a yell. "In truth, it's the ideal occasion, with all these observers present, all these prominent figures from our circles." A shiver coursed through me. The manner he pronounced observers twisted my gut. I scanned around and noticed we were encircled by his professional contacts, his relatives, individuals I scarcely recognized. Emily was on the opposite side, still giggling with her pals, unaware of the unfolding drama. "Michael, whatever you're contemplating, I'm contemplating," he cut in, his volume increasing sufficiently for others to catch. "That it's time for genuine kindness, authentic family backing." That's when I spotted it. He delved into his coat pocket and extracted a compact satin case. For a second, I assumed it could be an additional nuptial present, but upon opening it, my veins chilled. Within were keys. My keys. The keys to the farmhouse, the storage building, the machinery garage. Keys I certainly hadn't provided him. "How did you obtain those?" I inquired, my voice scarcely stable. Michael's grin turned predatory. "Emily duplicated them. She believed it would be a pleasant astonishment, a symbolic act." He elevated the case, ensuring the surrounding people could view it. "But I believe we require the originals. Don't you?" accompanied by the title transfer forms. The scotch in my tumbler quivered as my hand trembled with fury. The what? Come on. John, don't feign ignorance. His voice was audible enough now that nearby discussions had ceased utterly. Emily is your sole offspring. The farm ought to be hers, ought to be ours. And honestly, a man of your years shouldn't bear that load solo. I sensed the burden of 200 stares upon us. The tunes had halted. Even the serving personnel had paused their tasks. Michael had masterminded this impeccably, crafting a communal spectacle where any denial from me would appear self-centered, irrational. The farm isn't transferring anywhere, I stated cautiously. And this isn't a dialogue for when you're deceased. Michael's veneer eroded fully now. Emily merits stability immediately. We both do. And that farm is idle there, squandered on an elderly man who can scarcely oversee it any longer. The affront struck like a tangible strike. Multiple guests inhaled sharply. I observed Emily's Aunt Linda shield her lips in astonishment. In the background, I could discern Emily had at last detected the disturbance and was approaching, her attire flowing behind her, bewilderment etched on her features. I declared, "No, Michael." My tone was more composed than I felt, and I intended it. That's when all shifted. Michael's expression contorted with wrath. All semblance of politeness vanished. He advanced, his breath warm with wine and rage. "You obstinate old codger. Do you comprehend whom you're challenging?" Before I could reply, before I could retreat, before anyone could step in, Michael's palm smacked across my face with a noise that reverberated through the quiet venue like a thunderclap. The blow was potent enough to unbalance me. My left foot skidded on the sleek tile, and I collapsed heavily, my side impacting the ground first, then my arm. Agony surged through my frame as I reclined there, dazed, the flavor of blood permeating my mouth where I'd nipped my tongue. For a moment, utter stillness prevailed. Then the murmurs commenced, swelling like a tide. Did he truly strike him? Oh heavens! Did you witness that? Someone summoned security. I propped myself on my elbow, surveying the ring of appalled expressions encircling me. Michael loomed above, his torso rising and falling, his hands still balled. He appeared as stunned as the rest, as though he couldn't fathom his own action. That's when I beheld Emily. She stood at the crowd's periphery, her palms pressed to her lips, tears cascading down her cheeks. But she wasn't advancing toward me. She wasn't hastening to aid her father, who had just been attacked at her nuptial. She was gazing at Michael with an expression resembling dread. I comprehended in that instant that this wasn't the initial occasion she'd witnessed this facet of him. Gradually, painfully, I rose to my feet. My side protested vehemently, and I could sense a contusion developing on my jawline. But I stood erect. I locked eyes with Michael directly, then allowed my glance to sweep over the assembly of guests, many of whom I'd known for years. "I believe," I articulated softly, my voice resonating in the shocked hush. "This event is concluded." I pivoted and proceeded toward the exit, my limb throbbing with each stride. Behind me, I could detect Michael's voice, elevated now, frantic. "John, hold on. I didn't intend that was... We can resolve this." I didn't pivot. I didn't recognize him. I merely exited the venue hall, departed the resort, and entered the lot where my vehicle awaited. Once securely inside the cabin, I retrieved my phone. My hands still quivered, but I located the contact I required. The device rang once, twice. Then a known voice responded. "John, how was the ceremony?" I shut my eyes, sensing the gravity of what I was on the verge of unleashing. "David, I need you to travel to Denver this evening. It's time." There was a hesitation. "Are you certain? Once we initiate this, there's no reversal." I glanced back at the resort where I could observe silhouettes shifting behind the illuminated panes of the venue hall. Somewhere within, my daughter was likely weeping. Somewhere within, Michael was probably attempting to rationalize what had transpired. Somewhere within, the existence I'd constructed for the past 20 years was disintegrating. "I'm certain," I affirmed. "It's time all learned the reality about the farm." As I drove off, I glimpsed Michael in my rearview mirror. He was positioned in the resort's entryway, urgently conversing on his device, his countenance pale with alarm. He had no inkling of what approached him, but he was about to discover. The journey back to the farm afforded me excessive time to reflect on how we'd arrived at this juncture. 30 miles of shadowy roadway extended ahead, and with each mile, the recollections surged forth. Not the pleasant ones from Emily's youth, but the gradual, methodical erosion of our bond that Michael had engineered over the past 18 months. It began modestly, as these matters invariably do. Minor remarks that appeared harmless initially. "Dad seems quite fatigued recently. Doesn't he?" Emily would mention during our weekend meals. "Perhaps he's laboring too intensely on the farm." At first, I deemed her considerate. My 65-year-old frame did ache more than before, and supervising 750 acres of livestock farm wasn't simplifying. But then the remarks grew more recurrent, more direct. "Michael believes you should contemplate employing additional assistants," she noted one night as we lounged on the veranda viewing the dusk. "He's concerned about you managing all alone." Michael, who had never stepped on an operational farm prior to encountering my daughter. Michael, who sported tailored outfits to family gatherings and grumbled about the soil. Michael was concerned about me. The actual coercion commenced roughly 15 months ago, immediately after Michael proposed. Abruptly, every exchange with Emily incorporated his views, his worries, his proposals. He was perpetually the sensible one, the pragmatic one, the one safeguarding everyone's optimal interests. Michael states it's unjust that I lack any lawful entitlement to the farm. Emily informed me one day, her tone meticulously neutral. He states most fathers would have already initiated the handover procedure. I recall how my tea tasted sour that morning, how my chest constricted with something I couldn't yet identify. Handover procedure. "You know, assigning the estate in my name for fiscal reasons." Michael's examined it. He states we could conserve thousands in inheritance levies if we prepare in advance. Michael again. Always Michael with his inquiries, his strategies, his expedient resolutions to issues I didn't realize I possessed. The most dreadful aspect was observing my daughter transform. Emily had always been self-reliant, resolute like her mother. She'd labored summers on the farm, knew every boundary and reservoir, but progressively, Michael's words began emerging from her lips. "Dad, you're being inflexible about this farm matter," she remarked during one especially strained supper. "Michael merely wants to assist. He possesses expertise in estate oversight." Estate oversight. As if the Twin Oak farm was merely another property venture. As if the terrain my grandfather settled in 1918 was just a commercial resource to be maximized. "What sort of expertise?" I queried, though I already anticipated the response would disappoint me. "He oversees various commercial estates in Denver. He understands land worth, market patterns, that sort of thing." that sort of thing. Not the variety that entailed rising at 4 every dawn to inspect expectant livestock. Not the variety that signified mending barriers in 90-degree warmth or forfeiting rest during dry spells. Hoping the sources wouldn't deplete. The coercion amplified after their betrothal. Michael began appearing unannounced. Typically when Emily wasn't present, he'd stroll the grounds with his device out capturing images, posing questions about land size and resource rights. Just inquisitive, he'd claim with that rehearsed grin, attempting to comprehend Emily's legacy. But legacy wasn't what he was assessing. I overheard him on the phone one noon standing by the storage, discussing property comparisons and growth possibilities. When he noticed me nearing, he terminated the call swiftly. Business discussion, he clarified. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I'd never conducted a business discussion standing in another's storage without consent. The deceptions started minor. 2. Michael would inform Emily that I'd consented to matters I'd never consented to, that I'd uttered things I'd never uttered. Dad informed Michael he's prepared to decelerate. Emily notified me one weekend. He's enthusiastic about having you assume more of the activities. I gazed at my daughter across the meal table, searching her expression for any indication that she knew this wasn't accurate. But she trusted him. She desired to trust him. When did I utter that? I inquired cautiously. Last week when you two conversed by the north field, Michael said. You appeared relieved to have someone to divide the load with. I recollected that exchange. Michael had trapped me while I was examining the boundary line, asking sharp questions about revenue margins and running costs. I'd provided him brief responses and departed as soon as feasible. Somehow, he'd construed my courtesy as zeal for his participation. The psychological manipulation intensified from there. According to Michael, I was always stating things I didn't recall stating, consenting to things I'd never consented to. Emily started regarding me with concern, as if I was becoming absent-minded, undependable. Are you feeling all right? Dad, she asked one night after Michael had asserted I'd vowed to display him the estate survey charts. You seem a bit disoriented lately. Disoriented. That's what Michael wanted her to believe, that her aging father was losing his faculties, becoming a liability, perhaps even hazardous to himself and others. The reality was, I was more vigilant than I'd been in years. I began attending to every word Michael said, every assertion he made, every tale he narrated. I started recording notes, tracking his deceptions, and I started placing phone calls. The initial call was to my attorney, Tom Fletcher, who'd managed my matters for 15 years. Has anyone reached out to you about shifting the farm estate? I asked him. No. John, should someone have Michael Reynolds, Emily's betrothed? He's been informing her that estate shifts are typical for tax motives. There was an extended pause. John, you know the circumstance with the farm. That's not precisely correct. I knew the circumstance. I'd known it for 20 years. But Michael didn't know it. And neither did Emily. I'd been bearing that secret solo since Elizabeth passed, shielding my daughter from a truth that would have needlessly complicated her existence. I think it's time to place some calls. Tom, are you sure once we commence this process? I'm sure. The second call was tougher. David Blackwell had been my liaison for 20 years, checking in every 3 months, handling the monetary aspects of my role. He was surprised to hear from me outside our regular timetable. Is everything okay? John, I think it's time to disclose the setup, I told him. My daughter's wedding to someone who doesn't grasp the situation. That's a major choice. Are you positive? I considered Michael's hands on my daughter, his voice in her ear, his schemes for property that wasn't mine to bestow. I'm positive. The third call was the most challenging. Doctor. Susan Ramirez had been our family doctor for 12 years. She delivered Emily, held Elizabeth's hand during the illness treatments, and assisted me through the bleakest phase of my life. Susan, I need you to perform something for me. I need a full physical and mental assessment. John, you just had your yearly checkup 2 months ago. Everything was fine. I know. But I need records. Official records that I'm mentally capable and physically able. There was a pause. Is someone implying otherwise? I explained the situation as meticulously as I could. How Michael was depicting me as confused, forgetful, incapable of handling my duties. How Emily was beginning to accept it. That scoundrel, Susan said, her professional composure faltering. Pardon my words, but that's psychological mistreatment. Classic coercion. Can you assist me? I'll do better than that. I'll conduct every examination available. Lab tests, mental evaluation, physical aptitude assessment. When I'm finished, you'll have proof that you're keener than most 30-year-olds. The outcomes returned exactly as Susan foresaw. Ideal vital signs, superb mental function, physical abilities far above typical for my age bracket. I stored the health reports in my secure box, along with the other papers that would soon prove vital. But I committed one error during those months of readiness. I underestimated how far Michael would proceed to acquire what he desired. I thought he'd persist in pressing slowly, eroding my resolve with patience and tenacity. I thought he'd sustain the mental campaign, gradually persuading Emily that her father was becoming unreliable. I never conceived he'd attempt to disgrace me openly at his own nuptial. I never anticipated he'd be desperate enough to request the farm keys before 200 observers, and I certainly never expected him to strike me. That blow altered everything. It advanced my schedule by weeks, compelled my action in a manner I hadn't anticipated. But perhaps that was beneficial. Perhaps it was time for Michael to learn that some secrets are worth maintaining, and some deceptions have repercussions he could never envision. As I arrived at the farm entrance, I could see my phone illuminating with unanswered calls. Emily. Perhaps. Michael, undoubtedly. People who'd seen what occurred at the event and wanted to know what followed. But there was only one call I prioritized making. I dialed David's number again as I sat in my vehicle, gazing out at the land I'd safeguarded for 20 years. David, it's John again. How soon can you assemble the committee members in Denver? If it's pressing, I can have them here by tomorrow dawn. I touched my inflamed jaw, felt the pain in my side where I'd struck the tile floor. It's pressing. Michael Reynolds just committed the gravest error of his existence. It's time he discovered who truly possesses the Twin Oak Farm. The reality about the Twin Oak Farm originated 20 years ago on the most dreadful day of my life. Elizabeth had been battling illness for 15 months, and we'd expended our savings on therapies that ultimately couldn't rescue her. I was seated in the medical facility's accounting office, staring at statements amounting to over $250,000 when the farm supervisor located me there. Mr. Hargrove, he said, his cap in his hands. I'm truly sorry to disturb you at such a time, but we have an issue. The issue was drought, the severest in 40 years. Our livestock were perishing, our sources were drying, and we had no funds remaining to excavate new ones. The lender was already hovering, discussing seizure. Elizabeth was departed. Emily was merely 6 years old, and I was about to forfeit everything my family had erected since 1918. That's when David Blackwell rapped on my door. I'll never forget that night. I was lounging on the veranda watching the sun descend over land that might not remain mine much longer when a dark vehicle pulled up the path. A man in a costly outfit emerged carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the sort of assured demeanor that accompanies substantial wealth. "Mr. Hargrove, I'm David Blackwell representing the Horizon Preservation Group. I understand you might be interested in a commercial arrangement." I was too weary to be courteous. "If you're here to present a bargain offer on my farm, you can spare us both time." "Actually," he said, settling into the veranda seat beside me without request, "I'm here to propose something entirely different. An opportunity to retain your farm and resolve your monetary troubles enduringly." He opened his portfolio and extracted a substantial agreement. "Horizon focuses on rural conservation. We acquire farms and estates from families in distress, then rent them back to the original proprietors for administration. You preserve your residence, your occupation, your heritage. We manage the finances." I was doubtful. "What's the drawback?" "No drawback. You become our farm administrator. We compensate you a generous wage, cover all operational costs, and handle enhancements and growths. From the exterior, nothing alters. You're still Jonathan Hargrove operating the Hargrove farm, but legally, the estate belongs to Horizon. For how long? Indefinitely. As long as you desire the setup to persist. When you're ready to retire, we'll devise a shift plan. If you wish to repurchase the estate someday, we'll discuss equitable terms based on present market worth." I stared at the agreement, my mind racing. "Why would you do this? What do you gain from it?" David smiled. "Horizon isn't just any funding organization. Mr. Hargrove, we represent some very affluent individuals who believe in safeguarding American rural tradition. They don't require instant profits. They're engaging in a longer strategy." "Who are these individuals?" "That's private. But I can assure you they're dedicated citizens who comprehend that family farms like yours are the foundation of this nation. They'd prefer to see them conserved and properly administered than fragmented and sold to builders." The proposal was too favorable to be authentic. Wage of $50,000 a year, plus complete benefits, all farm expenses covered, total independence in daily operations, and most crucially, Emily would succeed my role when I was gone, along with the choice to eventually repurchase the land. "I need time to contemplate, of course. But Mr. Hargrove, the lender is planning to initiate seizure proceedings next week. This proposal expires in 36 hours. I signed the agreement that evening. What option did I have? I was sinking, and Horizon extended a rescue. The following morning, vehicles arrived with excavation gear. Within a week, we had 2 new sources yielding clean water. Within a month, the livestock were robust again. Within 5 months, the farm was more lucrative than it had ever been under my possession. For 20 years, the setup functioned flawlessly. Horizon dispatched periodic payments, covered all major costs, and never meddled with my choices. David visited 3 times a year, always amicable and encouraging. I was the farm administrator, but to everyone else, I was still the proprietor. Even Emily believed the farm belonged to me. I planned to reveal the truth to her when she turned 18, but she was in university then, concentrated on her education and her social circle. When she graduated, she relocated to Denver for her profession. The farm wasn't part of her immediate future, so I kept delaying the discussion. Then Michael emerged, and everything transformed. The first time he visited the farm, he wandered around like he was performing an evaluation. He asked direct questions about land size, resource rights, and terrain values. He wanted to view estate records, tax evaluations, and profit reports. just trying to understand Emily's legacy. He explained when I caught him photographing the structures and tools. But his questions were too precise, too computed. He wasn't just curious about Emily's prospects. He was scheming something. I called David that week. We might have a complication. What kind of complication? Emily's partner is asking numerous questions about the estate. He's pressing for details I can't provide without exposing the setup. How serious is the bond? Serious enough that he's discussing matrimony. There was a long hesitation. John, you know the agreement's terms. If anyone outside the family uncovers the true possession structure, Horizon has the authority to end the setup immediately. I knew. I'd read that provision numerous times over the years. It was Horizon's safeguard against exposure or legal entanglements. If news spread that wealthy financiers were covertly acquiring family farms, it could generate political issues they wished to evade. What are my alternatives? Tell your daughter the reality. If she's planning to wed this man, she needs to know what she's truly inheriting. But every time I attempted to inform Emily, Michael was there, directing the conversation elsewhere, asking his own questions, making his own presumptions. He presumed the farm was valuable estate that would someday belong to Emily. He presumed I was a prosperous landowner who could afford to be generous with nuptial gifts and monetary support. He had no notion that I was essentially a well-compensated worker managing someone else's investment. The pressure heightened after they became engaged. Michael started making remarks about improvements he wanted to implement, changes he envisioned for the property. He talked about dividing fields, developing leisure facilities, maybe even selling off sections for housing development. This place has remarkable potential, he told me one afternoon standing on the ridge overlooking the main residence. With the right promotion, we could transform this into a premier farm, event location, corporate escapes, that sort of thing. My veins chilled. The Horizon Agreement specifically forbade any commercial development without committee approval. Michael was planning to convert a working livestock farm into a visitor attraction. That's not really my vision for the place, I told him carefully. Well, it won't be your decision much longer. Will it? He smiled. But there was resolve in his tone. Once Emily and I are wed, we'll be the ones making those choices. That's when I realized Michael wasn't just planning to inherit the farm. He was planning to seize it while I was still alive. He was maneuvering to sideline me, convince Emily that I was too old and inflexible to manage the property effectively. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every demand, every lie he told Emily about what I'd supposedly agreed to. I also started preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The medical evaluation was just the start. I also had my attorney prepare a complete file on Michael Reynolds, his credit history, his business dealings, his prior relationships. What we uncovered wasn't attractive. Michael had a pattern of targeting women with resources. His first marriage ended when his wife discovered he'd been secretly borrowing against her inherited estate. His business associations consistently collapsed, leaving his associates holding the obligations while Michael advanced to new prospects. But the most damaging information came from his current employer. Michael was facing an internal probe for dubious expense submissions and unauthorized use of company assets. He was likely to be terminated within the next 4 months. He was desperate, and desperate men commit perilous acts. I should have told Emily everything before the wedding. I should have sat her down and explained the entire situation, from the Horizon Agreement to Michael's financial troubles. But I kept hoping she'd see through his manipulation independently. I kept believing that my intelligent, independent daughter would recognize what was happening. Instead, Michael escalated to public humiliation and physical violence. He forced my hand in the worst possible way in front of the worst possible audience. Now, sitting in my vehicle in the farm driveway, I knew there was no retreat. Tomorrow morning, David would arrive with the Horizon Committee members. Michael would learn that he had just assaulted the manager of a farm owned by some very influential people. People who didn't appreciate threats to their investments or attacks on their staff. My phone rang, disrupting my reflections. Michael's name flashed on the display. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. John, look, I know things escalated last night. I was tense, perhaps had too much wine, but we're kin now, and kin resolves issues. Call me back. We need to discuss progressing. Progressing, as if striking me before 200 witnesses was just a minor hiccup in our bond, as if tomorrow would bring routine affairs. Michael had no idea what was approaching him, but in about 10 hours, he was going to receive an education in the difference between appearing to own something and actually owning it. And more importantly, he was going to learn that some people have allies in very elevated positions. I was awake before sunrise as usual, but this morning felt distinct. Every sound seemed magnified. The coffee brewer bubbling, my boots on the wooden floor, the distant lowing of livestock in the west field. Today was the day Michael Reynolds would learn that some secrets have consequences. David called at 5:45. We're about 45 minutes from the farm. The committee members flew in from Seattle, Chicago, and Miami. They're not pleased about being diverted from their agendas, but when I detailed the situation, they concurred this needed prompt attention. How much should I tell them about Michael everything? They'll want to comprehend exactly what kind of threat we're facing. I spent the next hour preparing. I retrieved all my documentation, the medical reports proving my competency, the legal assessment of Michael's character and financial status, the recordings I'd made of our conversations over the past year. Everything that would depict a complete picture of what had been occurring. At 6:30, 2 black vehicles pulled up the farm road, stirring dust in the morning light. I watched from the kitchen window as 5 people emerged, all attired in professional clothing that seemed misplaced against the backdrop of livestock fields and oak trees. David led the group, looking precisely as he had 20 years ago. Beside him walked a woman in her 50s with gray hair and the demeanor of someone accustomed to being the most intelligent in the room. The others were men in their 40s and 50s, all carrying themselves with the quiet assurance that comes from genuine authority. John, David said as they approached the veranda, I'd like you to meet the Horizon Committee. Victoria Stanton, Chairwoman, Richard Ellis, Chief Financial Officer, Alexander Kim, Legal Advisor, Samuel Hayes, Operations Manager, and Maria Gonzalez, Risk Assessment Specialist. I shook hands with each, noting their firm grasps and direct gazes. These weren't people who squandered time on niceties. Mr. Hargrove, Victoria Stanton said, her voice sharp and efficient. David has informed us of the circumstances. We understand you've been menaced and physically attacked by someone trying to seize control of this estate. That's accurate. And this individual believes you possess the farm outright. He does. So does my daughter. I've upheld the pretense for 20 years, as stipulated by the agreement. Alexander Kim opened a portfolio and extracted a device. We've conducted our own inquiry on Michael Reynolds since David contacted us yesterday. What we've discovered is alarming. He turned the device toward me, displaying a detailed financial overview. Mr. Reynolds is deeply indebted credit accounts, personal borrowings, and what seems to be wagering obligations to some disreputable parties. He owes roughly $120,000 to various lenders. Victoria Stanton continued, More troubling is his job status. Our connections at his company confirm he's under scrutiny for misappropriation. He's been utilizing corporate cards for personal outlays and charging clients for services never rendered. They're set to dismiss him next week, Maria Gonzalez added. He probably knows it's imminent, which accounts for his urgency to secure resources through matrimony. I felt a nauseous twist in my stomach. Does Emily know any of this? We doubt it. Samuel Hayes said Reynolds has been meticulous in presenting a prosperous image, luxurious vehicle, high-end residence, fashionable attire, all acquired on credit he can't repay. Richard Ellis consulted his own device. The behavioral profile is classic predatory conduct. He targets women with resources, employs manipulation and emotional mistreatment to gain dominance, then systematically depletes their assets. Alexander Kim proceeded. His first marriage concluded when the woman found he'd forged her signature on loan papers using her home as security. The image was becoming clearer and more repulsive by the moment. Michael wasn't merely an opportunist. He was a seasoned swindler who'd identified the perfect target in my trusting daughter. What's our legal stance if he persists in pursuing claims on the estate, I asked. Alexander Kim smiled frostily. Non-existent. He has no basis whatsoever. The estate belongs to Horizon, managed under an administration contract with you. Even if he were legitimately wed to your daughter, even if you desired to transfer your administration rights to them, he would need endorsement from this committee, which he'll never obtain. Victoria Stanton declared resolutely. More significantly, Maria Gonzalez added, his attack on you last night was observed by over 200 individuals. We have declarations from 5 witnesses who've already reached our legal staff. Mr. Reynolds committed serious assault against a Horizon staff member in the course of his responsibilities. I blinked. Serious assault. Assault against a person over 60 is automatically upgraded to a serious offense in Colorado, Alexander Kim clarified. And since you were functioning as our delegate, it's also assault against a corporate executive. Mr. Reynolds is facing substantial incarceration time. My phone rang, interrupting the dialogue. Michael's name appeared on the screen. Victoria Stanton motioned for me to answer it, while Alexander Kim activated a recording function on his device. Michael John. Thank goodness. Look, I've been reflecting on last night, and I realize I owe you a massive apology. I was completely inappropriate. The pressure of the ceremony, the wine. You know how it goes. Do I come on? Don't act that way. We're kin now. Kin pardons and advances. I'm suggesting we meet this morning, sort out the details of the estate handover, settle this farm matter so there's no more confusion. I looked at Victoria Stanton, who nodded for me to proceed. Estate handover. Don't pretend ignorance. John, you know what I'm referring to. Emily deserves her legacy. And frankly, after last night, I think it's evident you're not capable of managing the farm anymore. The way you responded to a simple commercial discussion, losing your composure like that, the boldness was astonishing. He was actually attempting to revise history, making it sound like I was the one who'd turned aggressive. Michael, are you seriously claiming that I struck you? I'm trying to be tactful about it. Look, we all saw what transpired. You became agitated. You swung at me. You lost equilibrium and fell. It was humiliating for everyone, especially Emily. Maria Gonzalez was rapidly jotting notes while Alexander Kim ensured the recording captured everything distinctly. So, you want me to hand over the farm to you and Emily? It's the proper action. John. And honestly, it's what Emily desires. She's been telling me for months how anxious she is about you residing alone out there, trying to handle everything solo. She'll feel much better knowing the estate is in accountable hands. Accountable hands, meaning yours, meaning ours. Look, I know you don't favor me much, but I'm not departing. Emily and I are wed now. I'm going to be part of this kin for the remainder of your life. We can do this the simple way, or we can do it the difficult way. There it was. The menace delivered with that sleek assurance that had fooled my daughter for 18 months. What's the difficult way? Michael, the difficult way is attorneys and physicians and capability hearings. The difficult way is Emily having to make some very tough decisions about her father's cognitive state. The difficult way is public shame for everyone involved. Victoria Stanton's expression had turned glacial. She gestured for me to keep him engaged. And if I just endorse the farm, all of that vanishes. All of that vanishes. We have a pleasant kin meal. We put last night behind us, and we begin anew. I'm even willing to permit you to remain as a sort of advisor. You could continue residing in the residence, assist with daily operations. Think of it as a comfortable withdrawal. The condescending tone was intolerable. He was offering to allow me to stay in my own residence as his worker. Managing a state he thought he was pilfering from me. I need to contemplate it. Don't contemplate too long. John, I've got attorneys ready, and Emily's growing more concerned about you hourly. She spent the entire night weeping, questioning if her father is losing his faculties. He disconnected before I could respond. I placed the phone down and looked at the faces around me. 5 of the most authoritative people I'd ever encountered, and they all appeared furious. Classic elder mistreatment, Maria Gonzalez said. Isolation, psychological distortion, financial exploitation, and threats of commitment. It's all present. The recording is more than sufficient for criminal accusations, Alexander Kim added. Coercion, attempted deceit, and plot to commit elder mistreatment. Victoria Stanton rose. Mr. Hargrove, I want you to call Mr. Reynolds back. Inform him you've decided to consent to his demands, but you need to meet personally to sign the documents. Tell him to come to the farm this afternoon. You want him to come here? Oh, yes. We have some matters to discuss with Mr. Reynolds. It's time he learned exactly whom he's been menacing. Samuel Hayes checked his timepiece. I'll contact our protection team. They can be here in 90 minutes. Protection team. David smiled sternly. Horizon safeguards its investments. John. And more importantly, we safeguard our personnel. Mr. Reynolds attacked one of our staff and attempted to defraud one of our estates. That demands a reply. I considered Emily, probably seated in some resort room right now, perplexed and heartbroken, believing that her father had somehow provoked the catastrophe at her wedding. I considered all the deceptions Michael had told her, all the ways he'd warped her affection for me into uncertainty and anxiety. What about my daughter? She doesn't know any of this. She will, Victoria Stanton said resolutely. After we're done with Mr. Reynolds, we'll sit with your daughter and explain everything. The truth about the farm, the truth about her spouse, and the truth about what he's been doing to both of you. My phone vibrated with a message from Michael. 11 at the farm. Bring the title and any other paperwork. Time to make this formal. I showed the message to Victoria Stanton. She smiled, but there was no kindness in it. Perfect. Mr. Reynolds wants to make things formal. We'll be delighted to oblige him. Michael arrived at the farm 10 minutes early, driving his rented luxury car like he owned the grounds. I watched from the kitchen window as he parked near the front veranda, adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in the side mirror. He had no clue that 5 of the most powerful individuals in Colorado were observing him from the storage building where they'd stationed themselves with a clear view of the residence. The Horizon Protection Team had arrived 50 minutes earlier, two former government agents who now managed delicate situations for the group. They were positioned around the estate, unseen but prepared. Victoria Stanton had been very explicit about their directives: observe, record, and intervene only if Michael became aggressive. Remember, she'd instructed me before taking her spot in the storage. Let him speak. Let him make his demands. Give him enough leeway to incriminate himself legally. I opened the front door before Michael could knock. He strode in with that familiar arrogance, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an air of scarcely contained victory. "John," he said, not bothering to extend a hand. "I'm glad you've seen reason. This is truly the best for all." "Is it absolutely?" "Emily's relieved that we're finally going to settle this matter. She was so anxious about you after last night." He placed his portfolio on the dining surface and opened it. "I've brought all the essential paperwork. Transfer of title, authority documents. Everything we need to make this formal." I stared at the papers he was distributing across my grandmother's dining surface. Legal forms he'd obviously prepared beforehand. Probably days ago. This wasn't a spontaneous choice prompted by tension and wine. This was a meticulously planned endeavor. "You've been readying for this for some time." Michael looked up, startled by the remark. For a moment, his facade slipped, and I saw scheming in his eyes. Then he forced a smile. "Well, I am a businessman. John, I believe in preparedness. After Emily and I became engaged, I started considering family resources, legacy planning, that sort of thing. Just being accountable. Accountable." I sat across from him, noting the small recording tool Alexander Kim had provided, concealed in my shirt compartment. "Tell me about accountability." "Michael, tell me about your accountability to your employer." His hand froze over the documents. "What's your occupation?" "Michael, the one you're about to forfeit for misappropriation." The color drained from his face. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Sure you do. Corporate cards used for personal outlays. Charging clients for work never done. Your superiors are planning to terminate you next week. They're probably pursuing criminal charges, too." Michael's eyes darted toward the windows, as if suddenly aware we might not be solitary. "Who informed you of that? Does it matter? What matters is that Emily doesn't know." "Does she?" "She doesn't know about the wagering debts either, or the credit balances, or the fact that you owe some very hazardous people a lot of money." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "You've been probing me. I've been shielding my daughter. The same daughter you've been systematically coercing for 18 months. Coercing." His voice elevated with authentic indignation. "I love Emily. Everything I've done has been for her. For our future together. Everything you've done has been for yourself. You saw a solitary woman with a wealthy father, and you saw a chance." Michael's poise fractured entirely. "Wealthy father. You think you're wealthy. This place is indebted heavily. John, I've examined the financial logs. You're barely maintaining equilibrium on this livestock operation. The only real resource you have is the land itself." There it was. The admission that he'd been researching my finances, planning to liquidate everything I'd labored for. I kept my voice steady. "So, you want the land, I want security for my spouse. Emily deserves better than fretting about whether her aging father can keep this place operational." He leaned forward, his tone becoming condescending again. "Look, I know you're proud. I know this farm means a lot to you. But be practical. You're 65 years old. You have no assistants. And this operation is barely profitable. Sell to a builder. Invest the funds properly. And everyone benefits. Everyone benefits. You get monetary security for your withdrawal. Emily gets her legacy while she's young enough to appreciate it. And I get to care for both of you the way kin should. The way kin should. Coming from a man who just admitted he wanted to sell my grandfather's farm to builders. What kind of builder are you considering? Michael's eyes brightened with enthusiasm. He extracted his phone and began scrolling through images. I've already had some initial talks. There's a firm out of Denver that specializes in upscale housing communities. They're very keen on this site. He turned the phone toward me, showing design visuals of a secured neighborhood called Oak View Residences. 180 homes, a recreation area, and a commercial hub, all constructed on what used to be the Twin Oak Farm. They're offering $4.5 million for the full 750 acres. Michael continued. Can you imagine? John, $4.5 million. You'd never have to worry about money again. I studied the visuals, feeling ill. You've already bargained a price. Initial discussions only. I told them I needed to consult the kin first. But yes, they're highly motivated. They want to commence construction next fall, and you get a commission on this transaction. Michael paused just a second too long. Well, there would be a referral compensation, standard in these kinds of deals. How much? 1.5%. 180,000. He said it swiftly, as if the sum didn't matter. But that's not why I'm doing this. John, this is about kin. 180,000. More than enough to settle his wagering debts and credit accounts, with plenty remaining for a new beginning elsewhere, probably without Emily once she'd served her purpose. What does Emily think about turning her childhood residence into a development? Emily wants what's optimal for you. She trusts me to handle the commercial aspects, because you've convinced her that I'm incompetent. Michael's facade slipped again, revealing a flash of annoyance. Because you are acting incompetent. This farm is a failing venture, and you're too inflexible to admit it. How long do you think you can sustain this? Another 4 years, 8. What happens when you suffer a cardiac event out here alone? What happens when you tumble from a vehicle and fracture your side? He was rousing himself into justified anger now, believing his own rationales. Emily will inherit this place anyway when you pass. All I'm doing is ensuring she receives something valuable instead of a heap of debt and dilapidated structures. Very considerate of you. It is considerate, and it's realistic. But you can't see beyond your own pride to do what's right for your daughter. That's when I heard the sound of vehicle doors closing outside. Michael heard it too and moved to the window. Who's that? He asked. His voice suddenly strained. I joined him at the window. Victoria Stanton was walking toward the residence, flanked by Alexander Kim and Samuel Hayes. Behind them came David and the other committee members. All 5 of them wore expressions that could have solidified water. Those are the people who actually own this farm, I said quietly. Michael whirled to face me. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that I don't own the Twin Oak Farm. Michael, I never have. I'm the administrator. I work for these people. The portfolio slipped from Michael's hands, scattering legal documents across the floor. That's impossible. 20 years ago, I was facing insolvency. These people purchased the farm and employed me to administer it. Everything you've observed, everything you've schemed, everything you've menaced me for, none of it belongs to me. Michael's face cycled through emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally comprehension. You're deceiving. I wish I were. But those people approaching my door, They represent a group worth about 1.5 billion. They own farms, estates, and rural properties across 5 states. And you just spent the last year trying to defraud them. The knock on the door came precisely on cue. I opened it to find Victoria Stanton and her team waiting on the veranda. "Mr. Hargrove," she said formally, "thank you for summoning us. I believe you have someone here who wants to discuss estate transactions." Michael was retreating toward the distant wall, his eyes wide with panic. "This is an ambush." "No, Michael," I said sorrowfully. "This is actuality. Something you've been evading for a very long time." Victoria Stanton stepped into the space, her presence immediately commanding the area. "Mr. Reynolds, I presume I'm Victoria Stanton, chairwoman of the Horizon Preservation Group. I understand you've been making inquiries about our estate. Your estate, the Twin Oak Farm. 750 acres of prime Colorado livestock land acquired by Horizon in 2003. Mr. Hargrove here is our farm administrator, and an outstanding one." Alexander Kim opened his own portfolio and extracted a thick file. "We have transcripts of your conversation this morning. Mr. Reynolds, coercion, attempted deceit, conspiracy to commit elder mistreatment. Quite an impressive array of offenses." Michael looked frantically around the room as if seeking an exit. "You can't substantiate anything. Actually, we can." Samuel Hayes held up a small digital recorder. Every word documented with Mr. Hargrove's full collaboration. "We also have witness declarations from your wedding event," Maria Gonzalez added, entering the space with the others. "Assault against an elder citizen before 200 observers. The prosecutor is very keen on pursuing charges." Michael's legs seemed to buckle. He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "This can't be occurring." "Oh, but it is," Victoria Stanton said icily. "You see, Mr. Reynolds, Horizon protects its investments, and more importantly, we protect our personnel. Mr. Hargrove has served us loyally for 20 years. When someone menaces him, they menace us." "What do you desire?" Michael's voice was scarcely audible. "We desire you to vanish," she said plainly. "Permanently. From Mr. Hargrove's life. From this estate. And from Colorado if you're wise." Alexander Kim placed a document on the surface. "This is a protective order effective immediately. You are barred from contacting Mr. Hargrove, his daughter, or anyone linked to this estate. Breach will result in prompt detention. You can't do this. Emily is my spouse." "Actually," Maria Gonzalez said, checking her device, "your marriage may not be legitimate. Our probe has uncovered some intriguing facts about your prior bonds. There's proof suggesting you never properly separated from your first spouse." Michael's face paled. "That's impossible." "Is it? We'll let the officials resolve that. Meanwhile, you have exactly 45 minutes to gather your items and depart the state." Victoria Stanton moved closer, her voice dropping to just above a murmur. "Mr. Reynolds, you are a petty, wretched man who preys on susceptible women. You are precisely the type of predator we've spent 20 years keeping distant from estates like this one." She straightened, her voice returning to normal level. "You will not contact Emily. You will not try to claim any estate or resources. You will vanish quietly, or we will ruin you utterly. Do I make myself clear?" Michael nodded desperately, then looked at me with something like supplication in his eyes. "John, please, I made errors, but I truly love Emily." I met his gaze steadily. "If you loved my daughter, You never would have attempted to pilfer her legacy. You never would have deceived her about me. And you certainly never would have struck me at her wedding. The protection team appeared in the entryway, two large men who somehow made the space feel smaller. Time to depart. Mr. Reynolds, one of them said courteously. Michael collected his scattered papers with trembling hands, stuffed them back into his portfolio, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back one final time. This isn't concluded. Victoria Stanton smiled, but there was no warmth in it at all. Oh, Mr. Reynolds, this is very, very concluded. The quiet after Michael's exit was deep. I stood on my veranda, watching the dust settle from his luxury car as it vanished down the farm road, knowing I'd never encounter him again. The Horizon Committee members were assembled in my living area, quietly packing their documents and preparing for what would be the most arduous conversation of my life. Mr. Hargrove, Victoria Stanton said gently, we need to address your daughter, Emily. Sweet, trusting Emily, who was probably seated in some resort room right now, wondering why her wedding had ended in ruin and why her new spouse had suddenly disappeared. She had no idea that her marriage was likely invalid, that Michael had been scheming to steal her legacy, or that everything she believed about her kin was built on a 20-year-old deception. She's going to despise me, I said softly. David shook his head. She's going to be wounded and perplexed, but she's also going to be relieved once she understands what Michael was really plotting. Alexander Kim looked up from his device. We've located her. She's at the Grand Hyatt in the city center. Our investigators spoke with the resort staff. She's been in her suite since last night, declining all calls except from Michael, who stopped calling about 40 minutes ago, Maria Gonzalez added meaningfully. Victoria Stanton made a resolution. We'll go to her collectively, all of us. She needs to hear the reality from you. But she also needs to grasp the broader context. 50 minutes later, we were seated in the resort's private meeting space. Emily arrived looking drained and bewildered, still in yesterday's wedding attire, her eyes red from tears. When she saw me with 5 strangers in professional suits, her confusion deepened. Dad, what's happening? Where's Michael? He was supposed to join me here hours ago, but he's not responding to his phone. I guided her to a seat, my heart aching at the trust still evident in her eyes. Sweetheart, we need to converse. There are some matters you need to know. Is this about last night, about what occurred at the event? She looked around the space nervously. Dad, I know Michael shouldn't have. I know he lost control. But you were being so challenging about the farm, and he's been under considerable strain. Emily. My voice was firmer than intended. Michael struck me. He attacked me before 200 people because I wouldn't give him something that was never mine to give. Never yours to give. Dad. What are you referring to? Victoria Stanton leaned forward. Miss Reynolds Hargrove, Emily corrected instinctively. I retained my name. Miss Hargrove. I'm Victoria Stanton. I represent the Horizon Preservation Group. We own the Twin Oak Farm. The words lingered in the atmosphere like a tangible entity. Emily blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. You own. But that's impossible. The farm has been in our kin for generations. It was in your kin, David explained gently. Until 20 years ago, when your father was facing insolvency after your mother's medical expenses. Horizon acquired the estate and hired your father as farm administrator. I watched my daughter's expression as the implications struck her. Farm administrator. I'm a staff member, sweetheart. A well-compensated, Well-treated staff member, but a staff member nonetheless. I've never possessed the land. I never had the authority to transfer it to you or anyone else. Emily's breathing became rapid. But you always spoke about it being my legacy. You always said the farm would be mine someday. And it could be. Victoria Stanton said. Horizon has always been willing to sell the estate back to the Hargrove kin if and when they were positioned to acquire it. How much would that cost? Alexander Kim consulted his device. Current market worth is approximately $3.8 million. The figure hit Emily like a physical impact. She slumped back in her seat, staring blankly. $3.8 million, Michael said. Michael thought he was marrying into affluence. Samuel Hayes said bluntly, he spent 18 months scheming to pilfer what he believed was your legacy. Maria Gonzalez opened her portfolio and extracted a thick file. Miss Hargrove, we need you to comprehend exactly whom you wed. Michael Reynolds is a swindler with a pattern of targeting women with resources. For the next 25 minutes, they outlined everything. Michael's obligations, his job issues, his history of monetary fraud. They showed her the recordings of his calls, the proof of his coercion, the evidence that he'd been planning to sell the farm to builders. But the worst disclosure came last. There's also proof suggesting that your marriage may not be legally binding, Alexander Kim said carefully. Michael appears to have never properly separated from his first spouse. Emily made a sound like an injured creature. He's wed to someone else. Was wed. The first spouse has been unaccounted for 2 years. There's an ongoing probe. My daughter bent over as if punched in the abdomen. I reached for her, but she withdrew. Don't, she whispered. Just don't. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could hear vehicles outside, the distant hum of the city continuing its daily routine while my daughter's world collapsed in a resort meeting space. Finally, she looked up at me with eyes full of anguish. Did you know about Michael? Did you know what he was doing? I suspected. I tried to investigate, but I couldn't prove anything until recently. Why didn't you tell me? It was the question I dreaded. Because I hoped you'd discern him independently. Because I didn't want to be the father who shattered his daughter's joy based on hunches. And because you feared I wouldn't believe you, she said quietly. I nodded. He was very adept at making me appear the issue, making you question my judgment, my capability. Emily was silent for a long time, processing all she'd learned. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but distant. I need time. I need to reflect on all of this. Victoria Stanton stood. Of course. Take all the time you require. Mr. Hargrove's role at the farm is secure for as long as he desires it. And if you ever decide you want to discuss acquiring the estate, we're always willing to negotiate with the Hargrove kin. After they departed, Emily and I sat alone in the meeting space. The silence extended between us, filled with 20 years of secrets and 18 months of manipulation. I feel so foolish, she finally said. You're not foolish. You're trusting. There's a distinction. Is there I permitted a stranger to convince me that my own father was losing his faculties. I believed Michael when he said you were becoming absent-minded, unstable. I actually started researching care facilities. Dad, I was planning to have you declared incapable. The admission struck me harder than Michael's blow had. Sweetheart. No. Let me conclude. I let him poison my bond with you. I let him make me doubt everything I knew about the man who raised me, who labored tirelessly to give me a good life after Mom died. Tears streamed down her face now. And for what? For a man who viewed me as nothing but a route to money he could pilfer. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't withdraw. Michael was a professional. He knew exactly how to manipulate both of us. But I should have known better. I should have trusted you. We sat holding hands while she wept, both of us grieving for different things. She was mourning the loss of her marriage, her trust, her sense of judgment. I was mourning the relationship we'd lost to Michael's deceptions, and the purity she'd never regain. 2 months later, Emily relocated back to the farm, not enduringly, but for a prolonged period while she sorted the legal tangle of her invalid marriage and reconstructed her life. The dissolution was surprisingly straightforward once Michael's multiple marriages were confirmed. He never contested anything, probably because he was too occupied evading both lenders and authorities. We never heard from him again. The last update from Horizon's investigators placed him in Canada, apparently attempting to begin anew with a fresh identity. I hoped he'd learned something from his ordeal, but I doubted it. Men like Michael Reynolds rarely alter. The farm felt different with Emily there. She immersed herself in the labor with the fervor of someone trying to escape her thoughts. She learned to repair barriers, assisted with livestock immunizations, and assumed the accounting with an efficiency that impressed even Victoria Stanton during her periodic visits. "Your daughter has superb commercial acumen," Victoria told me one afternoon as we watched Emily bargain with a livestock purchaser. "If she ever wants to present an offer on the estate, I think the committee would be very open." But funds weren't the concern anymore. Emily's inheritance from her mother's coverage combined with her own reserves and earning capacity would suffice for an initial payment. The real question was whether she wanted to bind herself to this place, to this existence after all that had transpired. The answer came on a serene Saturday night in October. We were lounging on the veranda watching the sunset color the sky in hues of amber and rose when she finally raised it. "I want to acquire the farm," she said simply. "Are you certain you don't have to feel compelled?" "I'm not doing it out of compulsion. I'm doing it because this is home. Because this is where Mom and I gathered wild blooms every spring. Because this is where you taught me to drive. Because this is where I learned what real affection looks like." She paused, then continued more softly. "Michael made me forget who I was, where I originated. He made me ashamed of this place, embarrassed by our uncomplicated life. But there's nothing uncomplicated about what you've built here, Dad. There's nothing embarrassing about honest labor and caring for the land." 5 months later, the handover was complete. Emily Hargrove became the official possessor of the Twin Oak farm with a loan she could comfortably manage and a father who remained as farm administrator, though now he reported to her instead of Horizon. Victoria Stanton attended the final ceremony, bringing refreshments and an unforeseen present. 20 years ago, Horizon acquired this farm to conserve it," she said, raising her glass. "Today, we're selling it back to the kin that cherishes it most. It's exactly the result we anticipated when we first encountered your father." As I watched Emily sign the papers that made her a landowner, I felt a tranquility I hadn't known since Elizabeth died. My daughter was home. She was secure, and she was in command of her own fate. Michael Reynolds was an unpleasant recollection that faded more each day. That night, as we walked the boundary line together, checking for damage from the recent weather, Emily asked the question I'd been anticipating. "Do you ever regret it, keeping the truth about Horizon from me for so long?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it made you susceptible to Michael's manipulation. I regret that it complicated your bond with the farm. But I don't regret shielding you from monetary concerns when you were young. And I don't regret collaborating with people who cared more about conserving this land than generating a rapid gain." She nodded, then surprised me with her next remark. I've been thinking about Mom lately, about what she would say about all this. What do you think she'd say? Emily smiled. The first truly joyful expression I'd seen from her in months. I think she'd say that families safeguard each other no matter what. And that home isn't about who holds the title. It's about who belongs here. As we walked back toward the residence, I realized that Michael Reynolds had given us an unforeseen gift. By trying to demolish our kin, he'd compelled us to reconstruct it on a base of truth instead of secrets. We were stronger now, more candid with each other, more grateful for what we possessed. The farm lights were warm and inviting as we neared the residence. Somewhere in the distance, livestock were settling for the night. The land extended around us, familiar and soothing. Ours again in the way that mattered most. I was finally liberated from the burden of secrets. And my daughter was finally liberated from the sway of a man who'd never merited her trust. It wasn't the conclusion either of us had envisioned, but it was the conclusion we required. Sometimes the best retribution is simply enduring those who attempt to ruin you. Sometimes the greatest triumph is finding harmony with the truth, no matter how intricate that truth might be. Now, I'm curious about you who hear my story. What would you do if you were in my position? Have you ever endured something similar? Share below. And meanwhile, I'm displaying on the final screen 2 other tales that are favorites, and they will certainly astonish you. Thank you for listening to the end.